Hello and welcome from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nate has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those that have some connection to Latin America. My name is Josefina Dominguez, and I am an editor for Latinlist, a proud sponsor of the Crossing Borders podcast. Sign up for our weekly updates on latinlist.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nate's guest today is Matías Muchnick, the CEO and founder of NotCo, a food tech company that is using artificial intelligence to disrupt the food industry by recreating traditionally animal-based foods using plant-based ingredients. Matías tells Nate about his decision to leave the investment banking world to start his own business where he would be teaching an algorithm to create a plant-based mayo. They talk about his experience at the University of Berkeley and how he met his two current co-founders. And finally, they cover NotCo's incredible trajectory from the moment Matías received a call from IndieBio, one of the top biotech accelerators in the world, to their first contact with Kazakh Ventures and eventually becoming the first startup Jeff Bezos invested in Latam. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Matías Muchnick.
Hey, Matías, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
Thank you, Nathan, for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Where are you in the world today?
I'm actually in NotCo office in Santiago in Chile.
And we were just talking before this. You just got out of a 6-month long quarantine yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Very long. This has been, the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. Not getting out, not doing sports regularly, outdoors. So it was, a breath of freedom. So happy to be here in this spot, opening up quarantine.
So tell me a little bit about NotCo. What do you guys do?
Well, we're a food tech company that is using artificial intelligence to really disrupt the food industry in the sense that we are creating, unbelievably delicious products or food products that instead of coming from animals, they come from plants, right? So we do milk, cheese, eggs, meat, or anything that, that is animal-based or traditionally animal-based. And we understand them at a molecular level to really understand how to recreate them, but just using plant-based ingredients, and therefore doing the same product, but in a more sustainable and more efficient, using less water, less land, and less energy to create nutrition for this growing world. Understanding that we cannot sustain this food industry or the way the food industry works any longer. We're against the clock here, and we're using all of the power of artificial intelligence to really help us scale plant-based, sustainable, and efficient nutrition for the world.
What was the first product that you launched?
So NotCo was founded end of 2015, beginning of 2016, and we took 1.5 years to launch our first product. We launched March 2017. A first product that was not mayo. Basically, it's a mayonnaise that is a plant-based, replacement. But the good thing about that product and about that launching was that, of course, it took us 1.5 years. I tasted the worst thing I've ever tasted. We were basically training an algorithm to understand the human brain on what we like from mayo and what we dislike from mayo, and how to replicate it with plants, right? So we took 1.5 years to really understand what data was important to analyze or to feed the algorithm in order for him to understand what it was, a mayonnaise, and how to replicate it, right? This idea and this concept of there's more than 400,000 species of plants in the world, and we just explored only 1% of them. We have no idea what 99% of the rest can do. And the algorithm suggested to replace eggs in a mayo with a combination of chickpea and lupin. They're two legumes, of course, that the amino acidic structure is super similar to eggs. So the end result was a product that was called Not Mayo, because literally it wasn't a mayo, right, by definition. And we launched in March 2017 in the what would be like Whole Foods of Chile, with jumbo stores. And in only 8 months of sales, we achieved 8% of market share of the total mayo category. Chile, and this is a fun fact, not super proud about it, but Chile is the third biggest mayo consumer in the world per capita. We eat everything with mayo. I think you lived here, Nathan, in Chile. You know what I'm talking about. With everything with mayo. So gaining the 8% of market share in the mayo category in this big retailer really created our first success story. That then in the coming years, of course, it was amplified with other products in other geographies and so on and so forth. But I'm sure we're going to be talking about that later. So
Yeah, I definitely ate more mayonnaise in my first 6 months in Chile than I did in my whole life before that. And if you can make a mayo that Chileans like, that's not mayo, you're going to be successful.
yeah,
It's probably the world's most
exactly.
discerning mayo clients.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, mayo, I mean, how much innovation did you get from the mayo category in the last 30 years? None, right? It's a category that was diminishing. Of course, the consumers or the new generation of consumers really didn't want, to have mayo in their dishes, or at least the less calories, a better for you mayo, right? That was the appetite appeal in that category itself. So we went out with not mayo, and in order to get to the 8% of market share in that category, what we did was in-store tastings. That was our strategy. Like, let's put this product in the hand of the consumer and they will love it, right? But we need to communicate it in the right way as well. So, and then I'll go directly into the concept of not. Not makes sense in the food industry because people have a general understanding that the food system is broken. They don't want the multinationals anymore. They want the new things. They want the products that are not only great in product, but they also have a great purpose, right? So, of course, the first barrier always in a food product is taste. So taste is king, right? So we did in-store tastings. We knew that our product was absolutely delicious. And 85% of the people that tried our mayo bought it, and 87% of the people that bought it repurchased. Where 90% of our consumers weren't vegan, weren't vegetarian, they had no restrictions whatsoever. And that, to us, Nathan, was exactly the purpose of the company. We needed to create plant-based product that appealed to the mass market. Otherwise, we weren't going to do anything. We weren't going to do, to move the needle of sustainability, of the use of resources, of the environmental impact. We needed to appeal to the mass market. And that relies both in the quality of the product, the communication strategy, and the pricing. So how affordable the product was as well.
We're going to go deeper into the business in a little bit here. I want to dig into your background. So you're from Chile, and did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Or was this something that just came up during your business career?
Absolutely, came up in the business career. It was one of those things that goes along a story of my story could have been a very boring story, an asset, investment banker story. I'm a finance major. I graduated from school here in Chile. I worked in financial institutions. First here in Chile in Larraín Vial, and then in JP Morgan in Hong Kong. And very quickly I realized I was in the private banking, so I got the chance to really relate myself with clients, and I basically managed the wealth of people very wealthy, right? And whenever somebody, whenever you ask somebody in the investment banking to tell you the story about their career or their career path, they were like, it was like, oh, I became an analyst, and then I became a director, and I became, this and that. As I said, when you talk to clients that made their wealth through entrepreneurship, everyone, when they told you the story, it was such an excitement and transmitted so much energy, and they were so excited about telling you their story and how in their perception they changed the world. That was something that was very contagious to me, right? I saw this and I said, shit, man, like whenever somebody asks me what I do, it's like I make rich people richer. That was, basically what I did. And when I asked these guys that were entrepreneurs, it was totally different way of talking, of transmitting energy. And there were an overall excitement of who they were, and they were happy. They were happy people, right? And whenever you saw, around you, you didn't see a lot of happiness in the investment banking community. So anyway, I said, this is it. I mean, I have to go and start my own, startup. And the question there was, well, what do I do, right? One of the things that I've been always very curious about is the food space and the food industry. It's one of those food, as a finance major, I studied very closely the subprime crisis and the financial institutions and the financial environment that led into the financial crisis of 2008. And to me, the food industry was exactly like that. Big companies sold products that they didn't even understand to clients that had a total disconnection between what they think they were buying and what they were really buying, and so this total disconnection between consumer or client and big companies was present also in the food industry. You had the regulators being regulated. You had the complexity of those products that nobody understood. You had to be a very sophisticated finance guy to really understand what you were buying as a consumer. The food industry was kind of like the same. One day eggs are good for you, the next day are bad for you. Meat is good for you, meat is bad for you. One day the public enemy is sugar. Then no, it's not sugar, it's fats. And then no, it's not fats, it's sodium. So when you have a scientific dissociation, when you have so much confusion behind an industry, it's because that industry is struggling in many ways, in conflict of interest and the ways of working. And that bothered me a lot. I couldn't understand that we were, doing such amazing things in pharma and in food. We were so, we were lagging behind. So that was, the moment where I said, okay, I want to understand the food industry in order to disrupt it. So I created my first food startup back in 2012. It was a vegan food startup. So imagine vegans in 2012 were like crazy hippies, anarchists, fighting for animal rights. That was it, right? But at the end of the day, social media was growing, Netflix was growing. So I really closely realized that a lot of the things that are being hard to see today, or in that, back in that day in 2012, are going to be exposed. The way we process food, the way we create food, so much water, energy, deforestation, land use, water scarcity, all of that will be someday related to the plate that you have it in front of you. And Netflix was doing that thing easy, and Cowspiracy was coming out, and What the Health was coming out, and all of these documentaries that really showed you all of the conflict of interests behind the food industry. It's going to be exposed. And we will have a total different generation of consumers and what they actually want in the future. So I decided to do this company. It was called Eggless. We did, again, of course, mayo. But I didn't have any idea what the food industry looked like. Bought machinery from China, installed it in my friend's house, in my co-founder's house. So it's kind of like the garage story. We hired this R&D company that made food formulations for big multinationals. And it was like, I related with myself with them for 1 year. I came to, weekly meetings and everything. The end result after 1 year and investing all of my savings into that project, the product was crap, basically crap. But what I realized there is what the food industry is not randomly broken. It's broken because it's operating in a technology that is obsolete. The technology that you have behind the R&D and the innovation side it's working on carbon. It's on coal. It's not working on electricity. There was no data. It was 3 guys in a lab coat doing trial and error in an experimental kitchen, reading research papers of 1980s on how to apply soy to replace animal-based ingredients, and that was it. So of course the product was going to be crap at the end of that 1 year. But I had invested in machinery. I installed it in my friend's house. We had to produce. So I was the guy who cooked, who labeled, who put the cases on the trunk of my car, went to the supermarket, took it out, and so on and so forth. So I had 2 years of an amazing experience from the garage to positioning the product and the brand in every single store in Chile, including Walmart. And we did well. After 2 years, I sold the company. I went to the US. And that's where the next step of my entrepreneurship career started, which was the research and all of the ground building of NotCo.
So going back to the decision of jumping from investment banking into a food company and the context of Latin America, especially then, that one, entrepreneurship was not the popular thing to do like it is today, and 2, even less in food. You mentioned it was kind of the hippie anarchist people protesting for animal rights in Chile, especially at that time, not to what it is today. What was the reaction of friends and family when you said, I'm going to give up this investment banking career to do a food startup?
Well, I gotta say, my parents gave me a lot of support, and I think one of the success factors was the support that I got from family, right? My dad is an investment banker himself, so he understands what I was talking about, right? So the first reaction was, Mati, you're crazy. You're ruining your career. I mean, you're working, in the best banks, in the world. Like, keep on with your career. You're doing well. But the moment that I think I started to talk about what I wanted to do, changed everyone's mind, because I was a happy guy. I was the entrepreneur. I was talking about what I wanted to do with that passion, with that energy, with that vision, that people say, okay, this is not crazy, right? Everyone here, everyone you tell about, the good thing about food is that there's a connection between food and everyone, right? Where is it culture? Where is your family relations? It's your favorite restaurant, but food is present in everything. So there's an intrinsic relationship between food and humans, right? Therefore, when I talked about what I wanted to do, everyone says, you're ruining your career because you could be so successful in that career path, but this makes sense. So some of them, of course, they were super surprised and said, you're ruining your career, and the other one said, okay, interesting, right? So yeah, I think I got a balance between good feedback and very frightening feedback as well.
And going forward to starting the company and then selling it and then pivoting into, after the research period, into something similar to start going forward. Talk about that decision to basically sell the first version of the business and move into the next.
Yeah.
How was that with business partners and working together and all that?
Great question. I got to a point in my previous startup where I knew I needed to do something else. I needed to invest in technology, but I couldn't invest in technology if I didn't at least have a nuance of how powerful and what's available out there that could disrupt the food industry. I knew we needed to introduce a new technology. I didn't know what technology to introduce. I didn't know the capabilities of science by that time. So I didn't know a lot about the deep sciences either. So I knew I needed to do a next step. And there was an opportunity where we had investors really interested in investing in NotCo, in Negles, so my previous startup. And that was a time where I said, listen, either I go with this and treat this as a business, or I really get out of this startup, which I think it's done good, but there's not too much potential in this in the future, especially because I had a partner that had a different vision than mine, right? And so I said, listen, first, of course, I talked to my partner and said, listen, we need to reinvent the company. We need to invest a lot in R&D. We need to build not only a brand, but we need to build a technology behind the brand as well to be successful and to be a multinational company. And my partner didn't agree with that. He said, listen, we have a good thing going on. Let's not invest in things that we don't know. And that was a kind of like a breaking point. It was like, I don't want to stay in this, right? I really want to disrupt the industry. And with what I have in Egles, we're not going to disrupt the industry. We're going to be one brand, one additional brand for vegans. That was it. We're going to be a niche product and so on. So I got to the point where when you're struggling with your partner, with your co-founder, to say, your vision is not the same as mine. So I'm going to take the opportunity of getting out of the company, right? That opportunity, of course, is hurtful. The decision of getting out of a startup, which you started with a partner and a friend, it's a disappointment on everyone. But sometimes you need to think about what you want in the future and in your life. My vision was different than my partner's, so that was a breaking point, and we tried to move forward in the best way possible. But it's so hard to manage emotions, especially in your first experiences. It's very hard to manage emotions between partners and co-founders, especially when when your counterpart thinks that you are abandoning the ship, right? That's the reality. So of course we had some distance between us, but I think it was, of course, and time has also been good to me by saying, it was exactly the right decision I had to do. So yeah, I left Egles. I sold my shares and went to the US. And with that money, I founded my next step. I went to Berkeley, I went to Harvard, and that's where NotCo was conceived.
And thinking about first steps at NotCo, you had some experience building a food product. You had done the research to kind of think about adding technology to be able to make it into a tech-first business, kind of rethinking the first part of food. What was that what was that inflection point like right after you started NotCo to when you knew it was going to be something that could be successful?
I think that moment where I thought, oh, this can be successful was 2 years after founding NotCo. At the beginning, I thought the risk of this being, a flop is high. It's very high because, and continuing with the story, I went to Berkeley, studied at the Sutarja Center, did a postgraduate program over there in the entrepreneurship department. I got to relate myself a lot with the biochemistry department, not to become a scientist, but to really understand the nuance behind science. And what I saw there was unbelievable. 99% of that department was working in pharma, and pharma was utilizing the best equipment. It was focusing on data recollection. This was the time that CRISPR was conceived as the next big thing in pharma and genetics and therapeutics and stuff like that. So from the equipment, from the human capital, all of the best scientists were there. Again, the usage of machine learning to really support the research in ways that we never seen before. That was happening, right, in the science and more related to pharma. So what I did is grab a little bit all of the concepts of pharma and said, why the hell aren't we applying this in food, right? We've been feeding for thousands of years plants to animals in order to create our milk, cheese, our milk, cheese, eggs, and meat. Let's take the animal out of the equation and produce our milk, cheese, eggs, and meat from plants. Now we need to understand what plants to use, and we need to really make delicious products. And until today, we haven't made great things with plants in terms of tastings and affordability and so on. This was a time where Beyond Meat still had their product in the frozen aisle, that it wasn't great. It was a time where Impossible Foods had only one restaurant, serving their first version of the burger that wasn't very good either. But there was some advances in the food space that was super, super interesting. So again, I wasn't the scientist, so I needed scientists, around me. So I went to Harvard afterward to do a postgraduate program at HBS, and that's where the time that I met the other co-founder of NotCo, Karim. So Karim is a computer science PhD and postdoc from Harvard. He was working in the astrophysics department. He was doing unbelievable stuff as well. He grabbed data from telescopes, applied machine learning algorithms for astronomers to understand the composition of a star, the density of the atmosphere, the probabilities of having water, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what Karim did was grab really complex data and applied very useful knowledge. And what we did not have in the food space is we didn't understand food. So my idea was the only way to replicate something is to first understand it, right? And we have no great understanding of food. I talked to Karim with zero expectations of him joining the team, but he had this connection that I was talking about with food. He said, I probably all of the doubts that you have in the space, I have it as well. And my wife has it, and my dad has it, and so on. So, I'm in. So Karim joined NotCo, this ideation process of NotCo back in January, February 2015. And then I had a connection in NASA. The only Chilean guy, I think, that works in NASA today, Eduardo Vendek. And I said, Eduardo, please point me out somebody who really knows about science and can help me to create this future of food. I want to disrupt. I want to introduce new things. So he pointed out Pablo. Pablo is the other co-founder of NotCo. Pablo is a biochemist, biotech doctor, and postdoc from UC Davis. He's an expert in plant genome. He's one of these crazy guys that lived in Antarctica for 3 years, understanding how plants survived, in such extreme conditions. So he really knew what to look at in plants to really understand them as well, predicting functionalities, tastes, colors, aromas, and so forth. So I kind of like joined these two guys together and these two different sciences together to really create the future of the food space, of the food industry. And that's where we came back. We installed this, in the same facility that I'm here talking to you today. And we installed a very, very low key, R&D facility. And we didn't know if this is going to be a success, if this was going to be an R&D company. We didn't know if this was going to be a consumer good product company. We have no idea. So very recently, I can say, Nathan, that I think and I feel that this is going to be a very successful company. Just, recently in the past year or so, but at the beginning was a struggle, always managing variables that couldn't be managed or trying to manage them. So it was pretty messy the first 3 years or 4 years of the company. And just now, we see some amazing success story in front of us.
And part of that success story is finding the funding to build a business like this. And back when you were first starting in LATAM, it was really hard to raise money. I think that year there was only about 500 million invested in the entire region in BC.
Yeah.
It's grown a bunch to about 4.5 billion last year. And so it was already hard, but then doing a hard tech food business is even harder. So talk about the fundraising process and how you were able to raise money for the business.
Yeah, we started, of course, very bootstrapped. It was the capital was basically, mine and the co-founders. And April 2017, we received a call from IndieBio. IndieBio to us was, this biotech accelerator that we were never going to apply because it was a 100% chance that they say no, right, to NotCo. And I received a phone call from Ryan, and he said, "Hey, Matías, we're super interested in what NotCo is doing. Could you come for the next batch? That is happening in 1 month." And we're like, I thought this was a total phishing scheme, right? I said, "Wait, who are you? Like Ryan Bethencourt?" And he said, "Yes." Okay, I said, "Can you call me through video call?" And he said, "Of course." We had that video call. I couldn't believe it. They were talking to us, the top of mind of the biotech acceleration entity in the whole world, where you have, I don't know, 1,000 startups applying for every batch, and only 12 or 11 are selected, right? And they were calling us, giving us a waiver in the application to get into the next program, and we were like, "Of course we'll go." So that was our first round of funding. It was, of course, an acceleration program. They give you 250,000, and so that was our first funding. That kind of it was super important for us because they set us up to be. They put NotCo in the spotlight, right? And we were in demo day, and I think still we are the first startup that got a term sheet before demo day for our first round of funding with Kazakh Ventures, right? So Kazakh Ventures was, this was in December 2017. We closed our first round of funding. It was a $3 million fund, Series A or pre-Series A. And so IndieBio put us on the spotlight. They gave us the leverage to really go into Kazakh offices and Kazakh being excited about this industry because, as you well said, Nathan, there is no biotech VC in Latin America, period. Nobody invests in biotech with this concept of nothing disruptive in the science side on the R&D side can come from Latin America to the world, right? And so I think we broke that barrier throughout Kazakh. Kazakh invests generally in internet startups. These guys are the founders of Mercado Libre, now the biggest company in Latin America, market cap 60 billion in NASDAQ. And these guys really maybe didn't have the background of biotech, and they weren't going to help us in the biotech side. But they were going to help us to really understand the future of the company and what we needed to do in order to become a multinational company. It was great. We were 9 guys. We were invested, in December 2017. And in December 2018, we were already 74 guys with distribution nationwide in Chile, opening up Argentina and Brazil. And that's December 2018 was the second round of funding of NotCo. And this was kind of like the special round of funding of NotCo, where we raised $30 million, which of course it was pretty big in Latin America at that time to raise $30 million. And it was led by Craftery. Craftery is a London-based fund that invests in disruptive FMCG brands. The general manager is Elio Leoni. Elio is a board member for Ambev, for ABI, the biggest brewing company in the world, for Barry Callebaut, and for Kraft Heinz, recently named. And so that was super important because it has also the story of Jeff Bezos, where Jeff Bezos participated in that round as well. So we were the first startup where Jeff Bezos invested in Latin America, right? So of course, very proud. It created a lot of buzz in the press release and stuff like that. But it was great because, I was doing a postgraduate program at Stanford at the time, and a professor of mine said, "Mati, if you had to pick one investor in the world, who would that be?" And I said, "Jeff Bezos," because of 2 things. One, because I admire him in how visionary he was. And the second is, of course, the vision of NotCo was always to launch in the US. So, of course, it was the acquisition of Amazon, of Whole Foods in that time. So I said, of course, it's going to be the greatest partner we could ever have in the launching of US. And that happened. That was it. He said, "Listen, okay, I'm going to find who we can contact to have Jeff Bezos inside the company. He connected with Melinda Levinson that went to the Princeton doctorate program with my Stanford professor, and he said, we nailed it. One week and a half later, we had the okay of Jeff Bezos investing in the company. So super happy about that. That allowed us to get distribution in Argentina, in Brazil, expand our portfolio of products, make this amazing deal with Burger King and Papa John's in Latin America, selling, products throughout their stores. Same thing that Impossible did in the US, we did it in Latin America, starting in Chile. They just gave us 3 additional countries. We really performed really well. We launched the next product in 2020. We're ready to launch in the US as well. But I don't want to give so many plans, but always the funding side was super difficult in Latin America. We don't have any Chilean investors. We only have international investors. So CASE being the Latin America representative, but all of the rest come from other parts of the world.
And you have some new stuff coming out in your fundraising story. What's happening next?
As I said, we are consolidating our top of mind in Latin America. We've thrived in LATAM. We became the top of mind, on the plant-based category in the region, and we want to keep it that way and keep growing and keep the momentum. We've grown 5-6 times what we did last year, only in the first semester of this year, and we hope to be the trend for the second half. This is, and of course, the excitement around food companies in this space post-COVID is high, right? Because the consumer also changed, right? And they had, the skepticism of going into the plant-based section really became, or the gap is shorter now, and it is becoming more mainstream. So going into COVID and going into a post-COVID situation, we will have an advantage, right? And this space is super sexy. But we also, as I was telling you, we're launching in the US, right? So we're doing it in a very, very nice way with a QSR partnership that is nationwide, with a retailer that is, absolutely the top of mind in the category that we're playing. And it's going to be a nationwide launching in November. And well, we're talking, of course, in the online channel with Amazon. So that's the idea, to gain, nationwide distribution. And to support the launching in the US and to support the consolidation of Latin America, we will be announcing our third round of funding. It's an $85 million round. It's co-led by El Catterton and Future Positive. It's an amazing milestone for both the company and for Latin American startups. We will be the best funded company in Chile in the history of the country. So that's something that we're super honored to announce. But we're more honored to announce that we are doing the impact in the world that we really wanted, right? And hopefully this converts into a trend in Latin America, to have a tech company that is launching in the US, something that the US has never seen before. That is our main reason why we're so honored and excited for the future of the company, and raising this amount of money from such amazing investors. We have also General Catalyst. We have Silicon Valley funds participating in the round that are investing both in the technology and the execution throughout a CPG company and an amazing brand in the US, with something that the US hasn't seen before. And I'm very proud to announce that. And yeah, that's what's coming up. It was imagine raising money in COVID, man. Nathan, I can tell you more stories about that later.
Yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up when there's some more distance from COVID and you can tell the stories. But I can imagine seeing from our portfolio of companies what they went through, and then us sitting on the other side of the table and getting some deals done during COVID. It wasn't an easy time, and still isn't an easy time.
No, how many stories? I've heard so many stories about renegotiating valuations, funds dropping at the last time, with the documents already signed. The money didn't appear in the bank. There's a lot of stories around that. Thankfully, we aren't one of those stories. We are kind of like the success stories, but in the last minute success stories. My heart was in my throat a couple of times. So yeah, no, more stories to come, definitely. But yeah, very, very difficult times to raise money.
If you could go back to when you first started your first company, knowing everything you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would first tell me that I'm I'm going in the right direction. Sometimes you're very scared and fearful of the future, especially when you don't have anything very clear. And of course, a tap on the back saying everything is going to be okay. That is something that I would do. The next one is I would go back really and say there is a balance between vision and execution that I wasn't aware of. And I'm not the guy who necessarily need to do the part of the execution, right? Hire a great execution team. Be very self-aware of who you are, what you like to do, and what you dislike to do. What are you good at doing and what you're bad at doing, and complement those bad things, right, with people. I think this ongoing thought of balancing vision and execution is one of the key learnings I've got in my startup career and in my entrepreneurship career. It's really something that you undermine and underestimate. It's the execution part, because as entrepreneurs, we have a vision and we keep that vision. And we think that having this vision will make it a reality, but that's not true. How many great ideas have died in the process of being, big companies or being big because they lack of execution? So this balance between, probably is very basic, a very basic, suggestion that I would do to myself, but that part is super, super key to the success of a great vision. It's absolutely execution.
Do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, or documentaries you'd like to recommend to people, whether about business or just life in general?
Yeah, sure. I'm a big fan of Ben Horowitz as an entrepreneur and his writing. I'm not a book guy. I'm not a podcast guy. I am not a literate guy either. My attention is very low, so I can't concentrate a lot in reading a book. But so audiobooks really saved my life. So I heard the book of Ben Horowitz, The Hard Things About Hard Things. I think that book is, every entrepreneur should read that book before starting her or his own startup. It talks about, the good and the bad and the ugly and the very ugly in a very, very close way, that you can really understand the struggle that you go through, in doing a startup. Because a lot of people think that this is a glamour, lifestyle. Man, it's totally the contrary, right? And Ben Horowitz, I don't know if you read it, but it's an amazing, piece of book and great ideas and great advice.
Yeah, it's a great book. I think it's the most recommended book by anyone on the podcast. People, it's really a good one. And so I really like the fact that you've built something that's a global business from LATAM that is new and unique from LATAM. There's very few that have been able to do that so far. And I think it is the future of LATAM. There's going to be more and more unique solutions that come out of LATAM and really provide the region's big companies following kind of the Mercado Libre story and building something that's new to the world. And so it's going to be exciting to watch as you continue to build. And we'll definitely have to do a follow-up sometime in next year. So thanks for taking the time to do it. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Nathan, for inviting me. Had a great time. So happy to do one in the future with more stories.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest, Matías Muchnick. And thank you to Angel and Draca for producing this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's ecosystem.